Well, our next speaker is no stranger to the SANS stage, virtual as it may be. I'm excited to introduce to you Rajvi Khanjan-Shroff, who is a 10th grader from California, who I believe this is the third time you've spoken for us at our summits. Is that correct? Fantastic. Well, it's
Yep,
always fascinating. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yep, it's the third time. Really excited.
Well, that's great. Well, I was super pumped that we were able to get you back into the schedule for this time around, especially for this group, because I think that you've got a lot of fascinating, not just information, but perspective to share on cryptography, as well as your experience just in tech in general. What we're going to get into right now has the potential to become an entire career, right? There's people that have PhDs in this stuff that have studied it for decades. And we're going to start to get into that a little bit as well, which is super important. So I know you've got your introduction slide, and I don't want to steal all of your thunder, but with no further delay, I will be happy to turn this over to you. And I'm excited for your talk here on the nuts and bolts of cryptography and how that applies to everyday cybersecurity topics. So take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Rajvi. I'm really excited to be here. So let's get started. I'm going to just share my screen here. All right. So a little bit about me. I am the founder of Project Cyber. So Project Cyber is a for teens by teens organization, and we're passionate about cybersecurity. So our members write articles on topics they're interested in cybersecurity, and they go through a peer editing process and for publication on our website. And we also have games and events and a whole lot of other content. And I'll put a link to it in the chat after the presentation here. I've also keynoted for the SANS Pen Test Hackfest Summit, and I've also presented at the SANS Cyber Camp for Teens. I've also placed nationally in the Girls Go Cyber Start national competition, and I was also a high scorer in the National Cyber Scholarship competition. I also had the opportunity to represent girls security in a NATO event, and I started an InfoSec and a chess club in 8th grade. So I think a question you might have going in is, what exactly is cryptography? And I think a good working definition is cryptography is a field that uses algorithms and various techniques to secure communication. And it's actually been around for almost all of human existence. So if you know about the Caesar cipher and the Scytally, like Romans and Greeks have used it, and then also Pigpen cipher. So it looks a little bit like tic-tac-toe with like letters and dots. And then also, if you've watched the Imitation Game, you've seen how Alan Turing used the Enigma machine to crack cryptography. And that's all history, but we also have it now, we have it today, and it's everywhere. So today, I'll focus a little bit mainly on the cryptography that we use in the internet and how it helps run our digital world. So we use it like in almost all cases. So like imagine the last time you just signed into an account. That probably wasn't like too far off, like maybe just a few minutes ago. And we actually have password hashing used there. So password hashing is a cryptography technique. And what we do is we use it to make sure that like you're the one, you're accessing the account, you're the one who should have the right to the account because it's yours. And then also when you surf on websites, it's encrypted using HTTPS and TLS SSL encryption. And if you're emailing, you have encryption and decryption, which all of this will go over a little bit later in the presentation. And it's to make sure that no third party can like read your message while it's in transit. And we also use it when we even just send text messages. You may have heard of something called end-to-end encryption, so that's also involved there. And the big picture here is Cryptography really is used for three main things, and it's used for confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. So confidentiality meaning that you know for sure that only people who are supposed to read your message can read it. And the integrity meaning that your message hasn't been altered in any way, and authenticity meaning that your message has it, like the sender you see on the message, like it hasn't been tampered with so that the sender is different. Like the sender you see is this actual sender of the message. Okay, so let's get a little technical with the vocab here. Plain text and ciphertext. So plain text is like the readable version of your message. So something like super secret message, which clearly isn't a secret anymore. And an algorithm can be used. So something like Caesar cipher, which was a famous technique that was used by Julius Caesar. And it works by shifting all the letters in a message X number of shifts. So with a ciphertext, if you have a shift of 3, then the A turns to a D. So the ciphertext of the plain text is what we see on the screen right over here. And so encryption would be our plain text to our ciphertext, and then our decryption would be our ciphertext to our plain text. Now, of course, as cryptography has advanced, concepts such as SSL certificates and checksums have come into play. And really a framework that's known as the public key infrastructure has been developed. And this is really what enables our day-to-day cybersecurity. Okay, so let's set the scene here. Let's jump into symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And I want you to imagine two people. And traditionally in cryptography, we think of them as Alice and Bob. And imagine Alice has a document that she wants to send to Bob. Alice decrypts her secret.txt and with a key, and she sends it to Bob. Now, what is a key? A key is a string of random characters that's used to alter data. And now, in order to read the message, Bob has two options. Bob can, one, use the same key Alice used to encrypt to decrypt. And this is actually known as symmetric key encryption. And this is where we use one key for both encryption and decryption. And so here we see encryption to scramble data, decryption to our original text, same key, and that's why it's known as symmetric key encryption. And here, the encryption process is very, very fast. However, from the security perspective, we only get confidentiality. And the reason is because you might have guessed it, we hit a snag if the key that Alice used to encrypt is intercepted by a hacker, because then what happens is all the messages between Alice and Bob can be decrypted. So we came up with asymmetric key encryption, and this uses two keys, a private and a public, and it's safer compared to symmetric encryption because, as you see here, to get to a ciphertext, we have a public key, and then to get to our plain text, we have a private key. Now, because the encryption process does take time, there are trade-offs. However, because of its safety, we have majority of our modern cryptography system based on the asymmetric key. And actually, the asymmetric key encryption is key, and pun intended, because it really helps us, it lends itself well to public key infrastructure. So that is a two-key asymmetric crypto system. And again, it's like what we use for public key to ciphertext and then private key to plain text. And what is a crypto system? It's basically what the encryption algorithm typically entails. And the components include the encryption and decryption algorithms, encryption and decryption keys, and plain text and ciphertext. And has a few positive points, which is why it's so useful. So it has confidentiality, we know that all our transactions remain private because of how the encryption works over here. We also have integrity because we can detect if an alteration has been made. And then also it allows us to have digital certificates, which makes sure we know we have authenticity. Okay, so let's also imagine another common scenario. Let's say you're downloading something off the web, and if you're like me, you might have had the question like, how do I know if what I'm downloading is genuine or not? And actually, hashes can help with this. So what are hashes? Hashes are kind of what you see on the right over here. And hashing is a one-way cryptographic algorithm. So what it does is it maps plain text into ciphertext. And hashing is meant to verify that a piece of data hasn't been altered and it's authentic. So you'll often find it referred to as one-way encryption. It's like different from encryption though, because hashing is not meant to be reversed. So that means it's used a little bit differently. And when used, it will produce a unique value. So we see here how even a difference of a word, runs and walks, leads to like completely different hash sum. And its applications are numerous. It can take place with files, software, passwords, a whole lot more. So let's jump into password hashing first. So what is password hashing? So anytime you log into an account, I have a question, like how do you know that the site like knows what your correct password is? Like how can it tell you've entered your password correctly? And that's because the site stores your hashed password and your salt, and it checks against this. So what is salting? So salting is generally a concept that's reserved for passwords and their hashes. The process works like we have a password, and then we add salt, and then we have like our salted password undergo a hashing function, which is then stored in the database. And this is also often stored along with the salt. And the key thing here, the main takeaway, is that because we have the salting happening before the hashing, we have a really like different way of storing text or your password. So anytime you try to access your account, the password you enter is hashed and then checked with the hash that's stored in the internal file system. And you know, if you have a successful login, then you know that both must have had to match. So talking about checksums, so going back to the example where you downloaded something, you can use checksums to verify the integrity of the download. And a checksum is basically a sequence of numbers and letters. And checksum is often generated in various ways using hashing algorithms. The most popular one that you'll see is the SHA-256. And basically how it works is all files and software have checksums, and this is often like displayed by the distributor for the user to check. And anytime you download something, you can find out what its checksum is, and then check if it matches with the displayed checksum. So what this allows you to do is it allows you to check if it matches, and then if it does, then you know your downloaded file has not been altered, or else you know the files have been modified, and then you know that they could be malicious. Okay, so another example you might have is, let's imagine you're entering your bank details, you're entering your information, and one thing you might have noticed is that there's a green padlock next to the web address. And what this means is that your connection is secure. Why? Well, because a green padlock indicates that a website has HTTPS, and the S here actually stands for secure. And the reason it stands for secure is because then SSL and TLS, which is a protocol, has been used, and this protocol ensures that all your like ingoing and outgoing traffic has been encrypted. And insecure websites will only have HTTP. So you have to be really careful when you're entering your bank details or any other sensitive information that there's a green padlock there, because otherwise you're dealing with an insecure website, and then from there your account and your details could be compromised. So to get a stamp of security, a website needs to get an SSL certificate, which ensures that the site has been encrypted with SSL and TLS, and also that it has other safety measures, which proves that it's immune to domain spoofing, among other things. Now, domain spoofing is basically just the idea that you can fake a website, and basically that will hide the fact that the website's actually malicious. And it's important then that a website has the green padlock, because then you know that it's genuine, it's legit, you can trust it. Okay. So we've been talking a lot about keys earlier, and so I thought it would be fun to kind of understand the principles behind common protocols, like the common ways we generate keys. So one of the ways we do this is through the Diffie-Hellman Key Exchange. And it's a protocol for sharing keys. It's important to note that it's not used for exchanging any information, just for sharing keys. And then its usage is everywhere from SSL encryption to SSH to PKI that we were discussing earlier. And it relies on the complexity of the discrete log problem. And that basically, in boiling down, what that means is, if you want to try to hack it or crack it, you're going to have to go up against a whole lot of math. And that's why it's considered secure, because no one usually wants to do that. Okay, and let's use a color visual to kind of step through the protocol here. In real life, it's actually used with large prime numbers, and it's also used with mods and things like that, but this is a great way of just kind of understanding the concept of it. So here we have Alice and Bob, and they start with the same color, and this color can be public. And then what we have is also the private color for both parties. And then next, both Alice and Bob will mix this color, their colors, and then they'll exchange their new color. They'll then add their private color to the other person's new color. And then this is key, they end up with the same color at the very end. And this is really the basis for how key sharing really works. Another great algorithm and protocol you should be aware of is the RSA algorithm. And this is prevailing, it's everywhere, because if you know that something's been encrypted using today's modern algorithms, then you know that most likely the RSA was used. And the RSA is actually an asymmetric key encryption model, and it's a public key crypto system. So what that really means also is that for key generation, we have to combine the key, the public key and then the private key. And it's also based on the idea that factoring large prime numbers is hard. So if we see here, we have the sender, the plain text data, and then this public key right over here, getting us the cipher data, and then the private key helping us get back to the plain text data. All right, so end-to-end encryption. And this is a way of communicating where only the intended recipient can decrypt the message. So the reason is because it's the message has been encrypted all throughout, and not just while it's in transit. So this means that any third party cannot just access this information. All right, so we've covered a lot of cryptography here, and I hope this helped kind of help you visualize how cryptography really makes our world go around. And literally, like without cryptography, we won't be able to really like share information. We won't be able to connect with each other and access the wealth of resources that is the internet. So cryptography is really a fundamental part of our digital world. And I hope you've been intrigued by this. I hope cryptography has kind of interested you a little bit and you want to read up on your own. Some resources I really recommend that helped me when I was learning this information was like the Code Book by Simon Singh, and then Computer Field Videos. These are YouTube series, and then also the Khan Academy Cryptography Unit, and then the Manga Guide to Cryptography. All right, I think that is it, and I'm ready to jump to Q&A.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's kind of funny you mentioned the code book, because even before I saw your slides, I was like, it's definitely a good resource. I got my copy that I just pulled off the shelf right here. It's an excellent read. Highly recommended for anybody that's interested in getting into this. Let's see. So of the questions that we had, one that I'll ask, this might be a pretty big one, but I think it kind of touches upon some of the common threads of just kind of general future awareness a lot of people have, even if they're not super familiar with cryptography. Do you have any thoughts on quantum cryptography and how that might change what we're doing in the future? And again, I realize that might be a really big topic, but just curious what your thoughts are from your perspective on that.
Yeah, definitely. And the funny thing is, I actually gave a talk on quantum cryptography for the SANS Cyber Camp. And so if you're wanting to know a little bit more in depth, maybe you will want to check it out. So basically, like the whole idea is we have cryptography systems in place right now. We have things that work, we have some security measures in place, but what happens when we get quantum computers? Now, quantum computers are going to break a lot of our systems today because the math that we're relying on right now could be broken because of quantum computers. So then we have to kind of look to other ways of making our information secure, even if they're quantum computers. And there's a whole field out there. So there's post-quantum cryptography, which is like a subset of cryptography. And then there's other like lattice-based cryptography and things like that. So I would say that cryptography right now is secure, and but once we get to quantum computers, the whole field is going to change. But not to worry, we do have some systems in place.
Well, it's not going to be boring, is it? There's always going to be new things to learn, and it's always going to be moving forward. So that's awesome. Well, that is great content. Really appreciate that. You know, one of the things that I took away, and as you go back through your hallway, I hope that you're able to take away as well, is a lot of the comments were, holy cow, I've learned this before, but it's never been this clear to me. So that's certainly something I like to highlight for all of our speakers, because when you can make that kind of click moment or the light bulb, whatever euphemism you'd like, you know, I know that that's a really big deal. So congratulations on lighting so many light bulbs here in the time that we had with you.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I hope that was helpful. So I'm glad I did that.
Definitely. Well, very cool. Well, thank you again, and we'll have the questions will be in here for the hallway for anything else that anybody wants to add.